Mark is a friend, and you all know that I came from the San Luis Obispo Church. That's how I started my unity journey, and talk about having a dynamic duo of Mark Welch and as the music director, and Richard Levy as the minister. The wonder I'm standing up here, I was inspired, right out of my complacency and my recognition of how amazing a spiritual community could be and how I was impacted by that energy and the inspiration that came through Richard and through Mark. And it was just like the perfect storm for awakening, So I just have so much gratitude for my beginnings, and I have so much appreciation for when a spiritual community can really shake somebody out of their forgetfulness, which was clearly my situation when I was at that point in my life. I had sort of pursued the American dream. I was trying to cash the check that so many people of my generation had been promised, that you get a good education, get a good job, make a lot of money, and have 1.7 children and 2 cats in the yard and a dog, and you'll be happy forever and ever, amen. And when that didn't pan out, I couldn't redeem that promise. That American dream seemed to have left me lacking and unfulfilled. It was my finding myself in a unity church that really woke me up to truly the source of happiness and well-being, and I have enormous gratitude. I really say this, and I don't say this for dramatic effect, that I really believe unity saved my life. Honestly, that had I not found these teachings, I was destined to go down a rabbit hole of depression and sadness, and who knows where I would have ended up. So I'm extremely grateful for unity, for the Fillmores, and for all the teachers along the way, because I really believe that I found the source of happiness. And now I don't always remember, but it doesn't take me quite as long to turn around, back to the source, which is what we hold to be true here in unity, is that everything that we're looking for is not out there, even though our ego, our separate sense of self, constantly is luring us into this illusion that what if life would be better if the circumstances and the conditions and the situations in our life would change. And of course that has us going out, and time again we find that we do get these little modicums, we get these little hits of happiness and satisfaction, which comes from this playing out this notion that if we have this, then we'll be happy. And that's the whole game that we get trapped in. And we do that until we realize that it truly is a seek but not find notion. When we begin to see that is only taking us further from the source of our well-being, then we turn around and we begin to do the spiritual practice, which is to find the happiness, the peace, the love that is within us. And that flies in the face of all appearances, because it looks like that that I'm here and I'm needing this peace and this happiness and this love, and that all of those experiences are going to be reliant upon you being a certain way, you agreeing with me or giving me what I want, or or the universe providing some need fulfillment that I hold to be that which I equate with happiness and well-being. And so when we recognize and at least hold it as an ideal that the peace and the love that I'm looking for is within me, then we kind of have to call off that search, don't we? I mean, that's sort of the first thing we do. In other words, there's something we have to let go of before we can actually receive the truth, which is that what we're looking for is what we are and what we are made of spiritually. And so it's important in our spiritual practice that we realize that there is a letting go that precedes the letting God. You know, we're all about letting God, but the letting go part is usually oftentimes the part that we get stuck with, because we're sort of wired for acquisition. If I feel like I'm missing something, whether it's, you know, a sense of accomplishment or self-esteem, or, you know, it's some lack that I have in my life, health or wealth or whatever the case may be, then the way the surface mind thinks is it's something that's missing, then I have to acquire it. So to think in terms of letting go is sort of flies in the face of that sort of logic, right? So we really have to remember that it's letting go of what's not so that we can realize what is so. And that sort of is an important spiritual practice that a lot of us are not familiar with. So we're talking about letting go. We're going to talk about it this month. It's also, you know, the season of letting go. If we look out into nature, we see that, you know, the trees are turning colors, and we'll be letting go of those, of the leaves, and that will leave the trees barren. But we know that that's all sort of this season that precedes the new growth of spring, which is promised. But it doesn't come. You don't have spring without fall. We don't have new life until we let go of what is in the way of that new life emerging. So the same for us. If we want to have our new life in God or in spirit, then we have to let go of the illusory ideas and beliefs that we hold that really are obstacles to the recognition of the truth of our own being. Does that make sense? So the letting go part doesn't sound as fun and sexy as, you know, the acquiring part. We want the God love, we want the God peace, we want all those fruits of the Spirit, but we have to recognize that we already have this because we were made in the image and likeness of God. So acquisition is really not, in the traditional sense, something outside of us coming to us. It's something that is already within us being what? Realized, right? Or recognized. So we don't acquire the fruits of the Spirit. We don't believe that there's a God that's apart from us. It's up in the sky somewhere withholding its blessings from us in some sort of a conditional way. That was the God that we created in our image and likeness, right? But the God that we know to be true is not an entity. It isn't something that's apart from us in any way. We are its expression. We are spiritual beings. Our very beingness is divine, yes? If that's so, then the acquisition of these feelings that we're wanting, love and peace and joy and happiness, is not so much something that has to happen in terms of an external event or an acquisition. It is about us really waking up and becoming aware of what's already here and now, yes? So this is the trick of this work, and I thought it would be worthwhile for us to talk about that. And I have these wonderful metaphors that come to me every once in a while, and this one comes from a teacher that I'm very fond of, Rupert Spira. He's an Advaita teacher, a teacher of non-duality, spirituality, and he talks about the separate self is like the part of the earth that is turned away from the sun. We know that sun is always shining, right? But the earth rotates and turns away from the sun, And when the earth is turned away from the sun, what's the experience? Light or dark? It's dark. And so the separate self, this is this imaginary self, in other words, who we think we are, is like that part of the earth that is turned away from the sun. It's not that the sun has gone anywhere, it's just that there has been an internal shift in terms of our sense of self. Instead of being aware of the light that we are, we turn away by imagining that we are these body minds. And these body minds are devoid of the love and the light that we are seeking, not in truth, but in the imagined self. And of course, if we imagine something and we believe it, then what's our experience? Our experience is what we believe, yes? So this false belief that we are separate from God, separate from the light, has us feeling sadness, has us feeling lack, has us feeling limited, has us feeling unhappy, essentially. And that's really what unhappiness is unhappiness is really you and I turning away from the source of our well-being, turning away from our true self. And it's really not a turning away, I guess. Maybe it's more accurate to say that we overlook it, or the Sufis and others call it a veiling. Remember Daniel Nehemiah's song, Lifting the Veil, right? So we veil this recognition of our true nature. And in the veiling process, it's kind of like Halloween, you suddenly take on this identity as a character. It's not really who you are, but you put on the mask, you turn away, and then you believe you are this character. And when we were born, our parents, said, this is a Tia, and this is a Dad, Dad, Tia, and, Donna, Dad. And so we really kept getting these really strong messages that we were these characters. We were identified with our body, and it said, this is your body, keep your hands to yourself, all that. This real notion of separation and being separate individuals was programmed into us, obviously necessarily so, because to live on this plane, we do have to respect each other. We have to have boundaries and, your toys and my toys and all that stuff. So that was necessary, but what happened was that we all took it, most of us, maybe a few exceptions, took it too far and forgot our original nature, our original spiritual nature. Now, the littlest ones, maybe up to about 18 months or so, really don't have that sense of separation. They are more, you come from the womb and they're one with the mother, and in fact, everything that they need sort of is provided for them. It's a real spiritual notion, right? Well, there's nothing lacking, and they're in this sort of perfect spiritual milieu in which all of their needs are abundantly met. And they come out into the world, and it takes a while before they begin to sort of lose this sense of connection with all of life. But we do lose it. And so our journey in spirituality is about going back to the womb, not and obviously literally, but Jesus said, what did he say to Nicodemus? You must be born again, There's being born of water, and that's the physical birth, but you must be born from above. And so this rebirthing notion is about going back to that original sense of connection with all of life, and not being seduced by the appearances of life, which would suggest that we are separate from life. That is true at the relative level of our existence, but it is absolutely false at the level of the truth of us, because we are what? Spiritual beings having a human incarnation. We are not human beings having an occasional spiritual experience. That's That's the illusion that we have, that we step into our spirituality. Maybe we have a good meditation or Sunday service, or you're out in nature, or you're triggered into this this vast sense of connection with life, and then you go back again. Well, you really didn't go anywhere. You just, what happened was the veil came back down again, because we're conditioned to think in terms of separation. So really this notion of turning away from the light is all that's really happening, and that when we are waking up, we're really just turning back to recognize that the light that we've been seeking, or the love that we've been seeking, or the peace that we've been seeking, is not apart from us. And it's not being held by some person that we look to as the source of our love, or the source of our self-esteem, or that that the government is responsible for my well-being or my abundance, or all of those notions fly in the face of the truth. And we have this amazing opportunity, all of us, is to let that go. Let that go. And it's not hard to let it go, but it seems like it. So what are some of the reasons we don't let go? Fear. What else?
Not in control.
Say again?
Not in control.
Not in control. Yeah. And I think it's fundamentally this identity, I guess you could call it identity theft. And we participated in this theft. We feigned that our identity was taken from us by the conditioning that we had growing up. But what's not true is not made true just because we believe it long enough. What's not true can be seen through at any moment. Yes? And so this idea of lifting the veil is really about being more present in the moment and sitting in silence, or whatever it is you do, where you sort of soften your vision, where you're no longer so convinced by the appearances of life, and you're more sensitive and you're more intuitive to the being that you are. And you can do this. We can do this actually. Just sit for a moment with me. I'm going to stand, but you sit where you are and just close your eyes and just be as you are. Just get in touch with your pure beingness. There should be a sense of aliveness. You know that you are. How do you know that you are? With your eyes closed and you're not taking in any appearance, you might feel some physical sensation which tells you that you have something, there's something physical to you. But really, isn't there just a sense of being aware that you are? And open your eyes, and so this practice is really about us losing interest in the content of what we're aware of, because that's usually what fills our minds all day long, right? We're not just aware in the pure sense. We're aware of this or aware of that. We're aware of the thoughts in our head. We're aware of the feelings that we have. And our thoughts are always in this notion of, I'm aware of. So there's a subject, and then there's an object, right? And we're all object-oriented. And so this whole notion of what we're really, really wanting in life, which is love and peace and happiness, that's what everybody wants, pretty much. I think that's a universal. I think no matter what your motivation is, it's the reason for the motivation is you want to be happy, all right? Peace of mind, happy, love, those are. So everything that we're looking for, we have translated into some notion that I'm one who does not have happiness, and I find that that object would be lovely and it would make me happy. And so I become a seeker, and I go after that object and I get it, and for a moment the seeking self dissolves. I'm no longer a seeker because I got that happiness, right? I get that, and of course what happens? I get that, and then a few moments later I'm back to being a seeker again, right? The separate self rises up again. He's turned away from the light, from the source of his being. He's back to this notion of outside in. If I get what I need and bring it to me, then I will be happy. We forget that it's an inside out process, yes? Does this make sense? So when we're constantly looking for objects, we are not interested, and we don't have our attention on where it should be, which is on the one that is aware. Because the one that is aware of whatever it's aware of is the one that can be aware of the indwelling fulfillment, which is the love and the peace that you already have. And it's becoming this sort of empty of desire. This is why so many of spiritual paths say that, particularly the Buddhists say that desire is, confounds your peace and happiness. Because when you're desiring something, you're saying what? I don't have it, right? So the more you are in this wanting mode, the more you're saying, I don't have it. And if you keep saying, I don't have it, then you put yourself in a perpetual wanting, a perpetual seeking, a perpetual yearning, which is a perpetual what? S word. Suffering. It's hard to even say it, isn't it? Suffering. Yes, because isn't the definition of suffering is wanting something and you get it and then it's not enough, or you can't have it, or you get it and it changes, right? I mean, that is the very definition of suffering. So we have to let go of those notions or those human practices as much as we can that are constantly having us seeking but not getting any lasting satisfaction out of life, right? So that's why, all of the mystical spiritual practices talk about this idea of subtraction or of letting go. Letting go. Letting go of what's not so. It isn't what you haven't learned. It's not, there's, I think, a Hindu expression that says, all this struggling to learn, when all we really need to do is remember. It's what we implicitly know as spiritual beings, but have forgotten. And so we haven't really forgotten in the brain sense. We just have become so conditioned to using our mind as a seeking device, as a way to navigate this life on earth, that has made it so, we have made a habit out of going after these objects and things, thinking that's going to make us happy, and we just find ourselves having those momentary, fleeting moments of happiness, and then as soon as that is accomplished, then, a new desire arises that cannot be satisfied by what we just got a moment ago, so we need a new object. And this is why some people become serial relationship killers, That's, we've all done it. I did it before I got married, but I was looking for the right person, and I dated a lot of people. And then I met Denise, and she introduced me to the notion of putting up a mirror unto my desire for this sort of perfect person. She wasn't a perfect person, but she was very much more self-aware than I was. In other words, she knew that the journey to harmony in a relationship is not about getting someone to give you everything that you want or fulfill all of your needs, but for someone who was committed to their own need fulfillment and recognizing that nobody can make you happy. That's the biggest aha that I have had in my life, is realizing that nobody can make you happy. Nobody or no thing can make you happy. Yes, you can have occasional moments of happiness, but that's what we were talking about. That's the fleeting happiness. And I deserve better because we're spiritual beings. And we deserve to have a knowing of this ever-present presence that is the fulfillment of all that we desire, which is love and peace and happiness. And it's just not going, there is no ultimate relationship or situation or lottery prize or whatever that's going to give us that. Now, those things are all fine as long as you don't make gods out of them. Because as soon as you make gods out of them, then you set them up to be one more disappointment, which is one more form of suffering. Suffering, right. And we're very familiar with suffering, and yet if we haven't been on this path for a while, we will keep playing out the ego notion of the answer is that person or out there or that situation, trying to find the perfect job or the certain amount of financial well-being where we can finally say, now I feel prosperous and now I feel like I have enough. But not enough is the battle cry of the ego. It doesn't go away, you know. Not enough is something that is falsely believing that its well-being is vulnerable and fragile and subject to being hurt or things being taken away. That's what the ego is. That's its very nature. And it doesn't even exist except where? In our minds. It's a thought, this notion of a separate self. So if we're going to arise into the awareness of who and what we truly are, if we are going to find our way into the kingdom of God, then we are going to have to be born again. And we're going to have to release this notion that the life that we're looking for that will make us happy is some version of circumstances and situations. That's just going to be one more disappointment after another. So letting go is the name of the game, and letting go. So letting go of worry was, and this has been an interesting week for me because I thought weeks ago this was a good topic for October just because of sort of the seasonal reasons. But since then, excuse me, I've been exposed to 3 different sources, and my mind has sort of been spinning with these different perspectives on letting go. So if this sounds a little jumbly, it's because all those ideas are sort of in my head. Hopefully clarity will come by next Sunday. But this is sort of an introduction to the topic and where this all sort of comes from. So I read a book called The Little Book of Letting Go. I read it years ago, and then I've been rereading it. It's by Hugh Prather, and it's a more practical book. It's more of a psychological, practical things that you can do to let go of. And it says a little book, but it's probably about 300 pages. So it has a lot of how to do stuff in there. it has a spiritual foundation to it because everything he does has that, but it's really much more practical in terms of telling about life events that he went through and how he dealt with letting go. And then I read another book. Recently I was contacted, I'm on the mailing list for Peter Russell, I'm a big fan of Peter Russell. He's a former mathematician, he's a spiritual teacher, meditation master. He wrote a book recently called Letting Go of Nothing, or letting go of no thing. And that notion is about, we can understand letting go of behaviors, that's sort of an external thing, like, I'm going to let go of, eating sugar, or I'm going to let go of smoking or some other thing that I'm hooked on. We can understand behavioral letting go, but he said it has to start, first of all, in your thoughts, letting go of the thoughts that give rise to the behavior. And so if the thought is that I need this in order to be okay, then letting go of that thought would be the precursor to letting go of whatever behavior would follow from that thought, right? So now when you realize that a thought is a thought a real thing? Is a thought a real thing? No, I don't think any scientist has ever found a thought, in a way that can be verified. Now there's evidence of brain activity and all those things, but so if a thought isn't a real thing in the physical sense, then it can be seen as what? Nothing. No thing, right? No thing. So Peter Russell's approach to letting go is about letting go of the thought. And you let go of the thought by seeing through the thought, by seeing that the thought is just arising falsely by, as I started to say earlier, about misidentifying who and what you are. So if you have been believing that you need to date a lot of people in order to find love in your life, you trace that back to the thought that the source of love is going to be in some individual. And you realize that the source of love is within you, then you let go of the thought, and of course that's going to influence your behavior. So I kind of lean more towards that, so I think that's the direction probably we will take as we go down this path together this month. And then the third thing that I was exposed to a couple days ago was the Sedona Method again. Anyone heard of the Sedona Method? No? Okay. It came out probably 20 years ago, and it's sort of had a revival now. And the Sedona Method, basically was the work of Lester Levinson. It was his insights that led to the development of the Sedona Method. And Lester Levinson was, I think he was an engineer, mathematician, and he had a heart problem, and he went to the doctor, and they gave him the diagnosis, and they basically said, there's nothing we can do for you. You go home and, prepare your life, because it's going to come to an end. And he went home, and he began to, go inward and begin to really realize how he was thinking. And he realized that most of his inner turmoil had to do with resistance. Yes? Like having thoughts and fears and, wanting to push them away. And any unwanted emotion that would come up for him, he said, I would feel myself just like recoiling or pushing back or feeling resentment. And there was all this really negative energy that followed a negative thought. And he said, as he was sort of waking up spiritually, he thought, well, if I'm really a spiritual being, why am I in such a battle with life? Why am I constantly like battling all these things that I think would hurt me? if I'm truly a spiritual being, there should be some capacity for me to be with life that's non-resistant and more embracing. Otherwise, the whole thing's a sham. If I'm not a spiritual being, then, then all that behavior, I guess, would be justified. But his intuition was that he was more than this body-mind and not vulnerable. So he began to use the opposite approach. He began just being with those feelings and those thoughts when they would come up and loving them, sort of sending love to them and love to his body. In other words, he welcomed everything that was coming into his life instead of pushing it all away. Now, not welcoming it in the sense of like, oh yeah, I want these bad things necessarily to come to me, but just the thought of them, he could welcome them. Because if it was a reality, then he knew that the best way to be with it would be to just allow it to be. It's sort of this equanimity, right? And as he began to work with that, what he realized is when he would welcome a feeling or a thought, even ones that were hard for him before, that the power went out of them. They didn't have a hold on him like they did anymore. And so he began to realize that the way for him to move through life more lightly and more gracefully was to embrace life as it was going on. And that led to this letting go. So as he began to embrace his fears and these negative thoughts, he realized that they began to come up less and less. In other words, he sort of made friends with reality, right? But what is. And by doing that, he was reinforcing this notion of his true nature. Because your true nature is not threatened by anything that your ego is threatened by. Isn't that right? If you are a spiritual being, what can hurt you? Nothing. Nothing. So this whole idea of embracing life as if you knew you were a spiritual being, and you knew that you couldn't be harmed, and you knew that you didn't have to live defensively and protection and fearfully and being so strategic about trying to keep things out of your life in order to be okay, would be a great strategy for a body-mind ego, but a terrible strategy for one who's trying to wake up to who and what you are. And so this has been a transformative thing, and the Sedona Method, hundreds of thousands of people have gone through this training and have had amazing results. And I did this years ago, and I forgot all about it. So I'm sort of getting back into it again, so you'll probably hear about that too. But I've talked long enough, probably given you 2 talks already.